Olympias was born into the royal house of the Molossians in Epirus, a region known for its fierce warrior traditions and deep religious fervor. From an early age, she was immersed in a world where myth and reality intertwined, a world in which the divine was never far from mortal affairs. Growing up amid stories of gods and heroes, she developed an unshakable belief that destiny was not a matter of chance but of divine intervention. This conviction would later infuse every aspect of her life, shaping her actions as a mother, a queen, and a political operator in one of history's most turbulent eras. Her marriage to Philip II of Macedon was not simply a union of two individuals. It was the merging of distinct cultures and ideologies. Philip, a master strategist and ambitious ruler, had set his sights on transforming Macedon into a major power in the Greek world. Olympias, with her intense religious beliefs and proud heritage, brought to the Macedonian court a perspective that was as mystic as it was formidable. Their relationship was marked by a potent mixture of passion and rivalry. While Philip pursued numerous alliances and produced heirs through various liaisons, Olympias remained singularly focused on the promise of her own son. It was this single-minded dedication to her child, combined with her willingness to invoke the power of the divine, that would eventually cast a long shadow over Macedonian history. From the very beginning, Olympias nurtured the notion that her son, Alexander, was destined for greatness. She carefully wove into his upbringing the belief that he was more than a mortal prince, that he was born of divine lineage touched by the gods themselves. In a culture that revered heroic ancestry, her insistence that Alexander was connected to deities like Zeus and heroes such as Heracles served a dual purpose. Not only did it bolster his self-confidence, but it also provided the Macedonian people with a celestial rationale for rallying behind a future conqueror. This blend of maternal devotion and political ambition set the stage for Alexander's eventual rise, as every tale of his heroic potential was steeped in the sacred myths of Epirus and reinforced by his mother's unwavering faith. Within the royal court, Olympias quickly proved that she was no passive consort. Her influence extended far beyond the private sphere. She was a keen observer of the shifting political currents that defined the era. Known for her participation in the Dionysian rites, a series of ecstatic, transformative rituals dedicated to the god of wine and revelry, she embraced a spirituality that was as intense as it was controversial. These rituals, which celebrated the dissolution of boundaries between the mortal and the divine, resonated deeply with her own belief system. They not only distinguished her from many of her contemporaries, but also provided a powerful symbolic foundation for her claims about Alexander's extraordinary destiny. In a time when the legitimacy of royal authority was bolstered by divine favor, Olympia's emphasis on mysticism and prophecy became an indispensable element in the narrative of Macedonian power. Yet the relationship between Olympias and Philip was far from harmonious. Their marriage, fraught with tension, reflected the broader struggles inherent in balancing personal desire with political necessity. Philip's pragmatic approach to statecraft, marked by a series of calculated alliances and marital arrangements, often clashed with Olympia's uncompromising idealism and fierce protectiveness over her son. This friction, playing out in whispered intrigues and public power plays alike, was emblematic of the complexities of court life in ancient Macedon. For Olympias, every personal slight or political maneuver by Philip was not merely a matter of private grievance, but a challenge to the future she envisioned for Alexander. Over time, the intensity of her ambitions and the depth of her convictions contributed to a reputation that was as polarizing as it was influential. The assassination of Philip in 336 BC thrust Olympias into a maelstrom of uncertainty and danger. In the immediate aftermath of his death, Macedon was plunged into chaos, with factions vying for power and legitimacy. In this volatile environment, Olympia's determination to secure Alexander's rightful place on the throne intensified. Accounts from antiquity, though often contradictory and colored by later biases, suggest that she was deeply involved in the political maneuverings of the time. Whether by subtle influence or overt action, her efforts were aimed at eliminating potential rivals and ensuring that the royal lineage remained unchallenged. The turbulent transition that followed Philip's demise was a crucible in which both Alexander's destiny and Olympia's political acumen were tested, revealing a woman capable of navigating the most treacherous waters of ancient power politics. As Alexander embarked on his legendary conquests, Olympias continued to shape his world from behind the scenes. Even as her son forged an empire stretching from Greece to the edges of India, she maintained a constant presence in the narrative of his reign. Through her persistent reminders of his divine birth and her careful cultivation of myth, she helped transform Alexander from a charismatic military leader into a figure of near-mythical status. The rituals she observed and the symbols she propagated, images of gods, heroes, and destiny, became integral to the way his soldiers and subjects perceived him. In an age when the boundaries between mortals and the divine were porous at best, her efforts to sanctify his achievements provided a powerful ideological underpinning for his unprecedented military successes. However, the death of Alexander in 323 BC marked the beginning of a new and equally brutal chapter in Olympias' life. With the great conqueror gone, his vast empire, assembled in a whirlwind of ambition and bloodshed, quickly descended into disarray. The ensuing wars of the Diadochi, a series of conflicts among Alexander's former generals and family members, became a bitter struggle for supremacy. In this chaotic period, Olympias emerged once again as a key political player, determined to safeguard the legacy of her son. Her actions during these turbulent years were driven by a mixture of maternal grief, unyielding ambition, and a desire for retribution against those she deemed responsible for the fracturing of the empire. In an environment where allegiances were transient and betrayal was commonplace, she navigated the shifting alliances with a resolve that was both admired and reviled by her contemporaries. The later years of Olympias' life were marked by isolation and increasing vulnerability. As the balance of power shifted among the Diadochi, the very qualities that had once made her a formidable force began to work against her. Her reputation for ruthlessness, cultivated over years of navigating court intrigues and violent power struggles, alienated many of those who might otherwise have supported her. The same determination that had fueled her efforts to secure Alexander's legacy ultimately led to a growing number of enemies among the Macedonian elite. In 316 BC, the tide of fortune turned decisively against her. Captured by a coalition of rivals who feared the enduring threat of her influence, Olympias was executed, a tragic and violent end that mirrored the turbulent life she had led. Her death not only extinguished one of the most controversial figures of the ancient world, but also symbolized the relentless and often unforgiving nature of power in an era defined by ambition and betrayal. In the centuries that followed, the legacy of Olympias would be recast and reinterpreted by successive generations. Ancient historians, many of whom were predisposed to view powerful women with a mixture of awe and suspicion, often painted her as both a nurturing mother and a merciless schemer. These conflicting portrayals, one that lauds her as a visionary force behind Alexander's rise and another that condemns her for the ruthless tactics she employed, reflect the enduring ambivalence with which her life has been remembered. Modern scholarship has only deepened this complexity, prompting debates over whether Olympia's actions were driven by genuine maternal love, a desperate bid for political survival, or an insatiable thirst for power. The scarcity of unbiased contemporary accounts means that much of what is known about her must be sifted from later interpretations, each tinted by the cultural and political biases of its time. Beyond the politics and the intrigues, what remains striking about Olympias is the way she harnessed the power of myth to forge a legacy that transcended the immediate realities of her era. Her deep involvement in religious rituals, the ecstatic celebrations of Dionysus, and the secretive mysteries that promised communion with the divine was not mere eccentricity. In a world where the authority of rulers was often legitimized by their perceived connection to the gods, her participation in these rites served a clear political purpose. By asserting that Alexander was born under auspicious, even supernatural circumstances, she provided a divine rationale for his military campaigns and conquests. This narrative of divine destiny, carefully cultivated through symbols and rituals, not only elevated Alexander in the eyes of his troops and subjects, but also set a precedent for how later generations would perceive the intersection of religion and statecraft. The personal cost of such a public and relentless quest for power, however, was immense. Olympias' life was defined by a series of paradoxes, a tender, almost maternal care interwoven with cold, calculated ruthlessness. The same woman who fervently extolled the divine nature of her son was also capable of unforgiving cruelty toward those she perceived as obstacles. Her relationship with Philip, for instance, was a study in contrasts. While their union initially symbolized the merging of two powerful traditions, it eventually deteriorated into a bitter contest of wills, with each partner maneuvering to secure their own vision of the future. In a society where personal relationships were inextricably linked to political strategy, Olympia's unyielding nature and her readiness to resort to extreme measures were as much a product of her environment as they were expressions of her personal ambition. Even after her death, the story of Olympias continued to resonate across the centuries. In art, literature, and later historical narratives, she became a symbol of the complexities inherent in the exercise of power by women in ancient societies. Her life challenges modern assumptions about the roles of women in history, illustrating that far from being passive or marginal figures, women like Olympias could and did shape the destinies of empires. Her legacy invites us to reconsider the boundaries between myth and history, between maternal devotion and political ambition, and between the sacred and the profane. The turbulent era in which Olympias lived was one of constant upheaval. Macedon's rise, fueled by Philip's military innovations and Alexander's unprecedented conquests, created a backdrop where traditional power structures were continually challenged and redefined. In such times, personal ambition and destiny were often inextricably linked. Olympia's life offers a vivid portrait of this phenomenon. She was a woman who understood that in order to secure her family's future, she had to embrace both the mystical and the merciless. Her story is a testament to the ways in which personal agency, when combined with an unwavering belief in one's destiny, can alter the course of history, even in a world dominated by the blunt instruments of military power and political expediency. In examining the historical record, one must also confront the inherent biases that have colored the accounts of Olympias' life. Ancient writers, operating within a framework that often devalued the contributions of women or sought to explain away their power through negative stereotypes, frequently depicted her as a manipulative and dangerous influence. Yet when one looks more closely, it becomes apparent that such portrayals are only one facet of a far more complex character. Olympias was a product of her time, a time when survival in the treacherous world of Hellenistic politics demanded both strength and ruthlessness. The very qualities that ensured her rise in a male-dominated society were the same ones that ultimately isolated her and precipitated her downfall. Her life, therefore, must be understood not solely through the lens of moral judgment, but also as a vivid illustration of the harsh realities of power and ambition in the ancient world. The enduring fascination with Olympias lies in her defiance of simple categorization. She was at once a devoted mother, a pious priestess, and a shrewd political operator. Her actions, whether driven by genuine maternal love or by a calculated ambition to secure power, continue to provoke debate among historians and enthusiasts alike. By elevating her son's status to that of a near-divine hero, she not only influenced the course of his military campaigns, but also helped establish a model for royal authority that would be emulated by countless rulers in the centuries to come. This model, which combined personal charisma with the invocation of divine favor, became a cornerstone of Hellenistic and even later imperial ideologies. In the end, the life of Olympias is a story of contrasts, a life marked by both transcendent ambition and tragic ends. Her journey from the rugged highlands of Epirus to the royal courts of Macedon, and finally into the violent vortex of the successor wars, encapsulates the volatile mix of myth, power, and human frailty. As we reflect on her legacy, we are reminded that history is not made solely by armies and statesmen, but also by individuals whose passions, beliefs, and actions reverberate through time. Olympia's indomitable spirit and her relentless quest to shape destiny offer a powerful lesson in the enduring impact of personal agency. Even in a world where fate and fortune often seem to conspire against those who dare to defy convention, her life stands as a testament to the possibility of transcending one's circumstances through sheer force of will. Her story compels us to question the traditional narratives of ancient history, urging us to look beyond the simplified dichotomies of good and evil. In Olympias, we see a figure whose strengths and flaws are inextricably intertwined, a woman who was both a nurturer and a warrior, both a keeper of sacred traditions and an agent of ruthless political change. It is this complexity that continues to captivate our imagination, inviting us to explore the deeper truths about power, gender, and the inexorable pull of destiny. Ultimately, the legacy of Olympias endures not merely as a footnote in the history of Macedon or as the mother of a legendary conqueror, but as a symbol of the multifaceted nature of human ambition. Her life, shrouded in both historical fact and enduring myth, challenges us to consider the ways in which personal conviction and divine aspiration can combine to shape the fate of empires. As we revisit her remarkable story, we gain not only insight into the tumultuous world of ancient politics, but also a broader understanding of the timeless struggle between individual will and the inexorable forces of history.